Israel's Prime Minister is gambling on a return to power after dumping his coalition and calling an election for March. Analysts predict Benjamin Netanyahu will win another term and he'll shift the government even further to the right. Here's Middle East correspondent Matt Brown.
Less than 2 years since the last election, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to tighten his grip on power.
The coming election is about one question: who will lead the country through the tremendous challenges facing Israel?
Analysts expect a more hard-right government taking a tougher line with the Palestinians. The latest polls show Mr Netanyahu's likely to be returned and join forces with his existing pro-settler coalition partner and Israel's ultra-Orthodox Jewish parties. He'd already fired his centre-right coalition partners, Justice Minister Tzipi Livni and Finance Minister Yair Lapid, accusing them of disloyalty.
The truth is that we have a Prime Minister who is afraid.
While Benjamin Netanyahu looks set to get the kind of coalition he'd prefer, anything could happen in Israeli politics where the public is notoriously fickle. But right now, peace talks are not the core issue for most voters, and Israel's opposition parties are polling poorly and deeply divided.
The key factor is whether the anti-Mr. Netanyahu camp leaders can agree who will be number one among them, and the rest will not stab him or her in back.
The elections will be held in mid-March. Matt Brown, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Dr. Jonathan Spire, who's visiting Australia from Israel, where he's a senior fellow at the Global Research International Affairs Centre. He's also worked within government, advising Israeli ministers on international affairs. Welcome along to the program, Jonathan
Thanks very
Spire.
much.
What are the issues pulling apart these coalitions in Israel?
Well, frankly, Tony, I think ultimately this comes down to issues of personality. It's a fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu has found it enormously difficult to work alongside Finance Minister Yair Lapid. And I think ultimately this is an issue of a total loss of mutual confidence in the two men.
So you say it's personality, but it's got to be ideology too, doesn't it? Because he's centre-right and they're for the middle ground?
Lapid is very much in the centre. There's an issue also of economic matters here. Lapid had a particular piece of signature legislation that he wanted to put in to take taxes off first-time purchases of apartments by young couples in Israel. You know that the issue of housing is very important in Israel.
It's probably the hottest button issue in Israel at the moment.
Very much so. Netanyahu very much opposed to that and therefore opposing that. And I think with Tzipi Livni more, yes, the issue was the matter of the peace process and Livni's meetings with PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas. But ultimately, I think also it came down to a basic lack of trust between these politicians.
Well, when you've got people meeting Mahmoud Abbas on the side, it's a bit of a red rag to a bull, isn't it?
Well, I think it was very much so. Even in a situation where there would be negotiations, after all, between Israel and the PA, the issue of the absence of a sense of collective cabinet responsibility in the Israeli system, I think is something which kind of dogs the system, whichever ideological part of the map you're coming from. And I think this was an evidence of an example of that phenomenon.
So coalitions are a problem in Israel. Do opinion polls give us any indication of what this new government might be made up
Yeah,
of?
very much so. Actually, all the polls this morning look point in a similar direction, which is that the Likud of Benjamin Netanyahu will emerge as the single largest party once again.
So he'll be Prime Minister again?
He'll almost certainly be Prime Minister once again. The likelihood of what we're hearing is that he'll try and form something perhaps of a different coalition which will welcome once again the ultra-Orthodox Jewish parties back into government. They were very notably excluded from the outgoing coalition. That'll be a major difference.
So this is the Naftali Bennett's Jewish Home Party, is it? Do they get a look in under this new coalition if there is one to be formed?
They certainly will. Bennett, of course, was in this coalition too. It's one of the complexities of Israeli politics. Bennett is a religious man, but he's not ultra-Orthodox. He's what we would call religious Zionist.
He sort of gives the impression of sort of the young hipster in Parliament, isn't he?
Yeah, well,
he talks the street language.
He's a younger politician. Of course, he's a very successful businessman, also an officer in one of the top commando units of our army. Netanyahu served there as well. He's certainly going to be back in there, whatever the coalition is next time. He's reckoned, by the way, in all the available polls to be increasing support for his party next time around. Currently 12 seats, reckoned to get around 17, according to the current polls.
Right, and Likud, lost 11 seats in the last election.
Yeah.
So if Likud goes backwards again and someone like Naftali Bennett does better, he's going to be quite a force to be reckoned with in this coalition, isn't he?
He will be, if the current polls turn out to be correct, and Netanyahu's Likud, as the largest party, has around 22, 23 seats, and Bennett, if indeed he gets the 17 he's currently reckoned to get, then absolutely he'll be yapping very much at the heels of the Prime Minister's party. He'll have a very strong position in the next coalition, if indeed the polls turn out to be correct.
Yeah, because I've just got a quote there from Naftali Bennett saying the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is insoluble and most Israelis couldn't care less about it anymore. Is he right?
Well, is it insoluble? Certainly there's been a peace process going on for a very long time to come. We haven't managed to conclude it. Bennett, has the idea of annexing a large part of the West Bank. Traditionally, I think most Israelis still tend, in the end, to support the possibility of partition of the country. It is generally a consensus in Israel today, in the centre at least, that Israel doesn't have an available partner for peace, and that, I think, does enable politicians like Bennett to make the kind of claims and the kind of assertions that they make.
So what's the electorate going to decide when this next election comes around? Will that be a defining issue for some of them, or is it the economy, for instance, which so many times is the defining issue in any election?
Well, I think personal security will be an issue for Israelis, and of course we've seen this wave of terror attacks in Jerusalem in recent weeks, and of course the killing of 4 elderly Jewish men praying in a synagogue in Har Nof in Jerusalem. So the issue of personal security, I think, will be there. Because many Israelis feel that the conflict has proven to be intractable, there's a sense in which if this conflict is going to carry on anyway, we at least want to know we've got a government that's going to try and keep us safe. Then I think we'll be high up there in the rhetoric of the politicians that we're all, I'm afraid, in for in the months ahead in Israel.
Well, the Israelis are certainly getting a chance to make a vote, aren't they, after 20 months? Jonathan Spire, thanks very much for joining us in the studio.
Tony.
Thank you.